So I'm scared. What am I scared of? Nothing. I'm actually scared of nothing. That is what it's like to be someone that's high on this neuroticism scale, someone that's predisposed to sort of negative thinking, sensitivity to stress, things like that. And some people will say, well, okay, just get over it, learn to not think negatively. Obviously there's something there, you need to do something about it. And the scary thing is, I've learned that this is kind of like a permanent thing. Now I was kind of learning about personality types and different personality traits, neuroticism being one of these big 5 aspects of one's personality, on these sort of big 5 personality psychological model. And there's different psychological models. There's the Myers-Briggs type indicator. And more recently, that has divided personalities into like a sort of turbulent type, which is basically the same as saying high neuroticism or not. So even though with the MBTI, the idea with that is you have 16 different facets, different personality types, and out of those you have either the anxious, stress-sensitive ones, or the relaxed, easygoing, less sensitive to stress ones. And yeah, I'm high up on the turbulence. Basically, this dimension of negative thinking, of anxiety, of being prone to stress and risk avoidance and concern, I've got it. It's kind of part of a personality, and it's considered that to some small degree a personality can be modified, it can be tweaked, you can adjust the sliders ever so slightly. If you're 100% on one aspect of or facet of the personality scale, you can maybe reduce that by 10-15% in the other direction, so you're only 85% that way inclined. You're never going to completely change it though. And I've realised for me personally, okay, the fucking shit thing about being really high on the neuroticism scale is, okay, that's it. You're stuck. You're stuck living a shit life for the rest of your life, and there's not really anything you can do about it. That's a horrible thought to feel like that. That's it's like basically being told that you're gonna live in hell for the next, I don't know, 70, 80, 90 years, however long you have to live for, and you'll never get out of it. The only release will be the void of death. Which isn't, much to look forward to, but perhaps in that circumstance, maybe it is. Now, I would imagine that 99% of all people would say, no, you are wrong. If you're someone who's, easily stressed or prone to depression and anxiety, you can change that. You can sort yourself out. You can manage your life. You can look at management, stress management strategies, read books on coping mechanisms. You can organise your life in a way that makes it easier to manage. You can look at meditative techniques and spirituality or religion as a way to sort of help ease the strain of life. And I'm not discounting that, and I will talk, and I have talked about things like that on previous videos. If you are highly neurotic, you need to do stuff like organise your environment, organise your social relations with people, your social network, and do it in such a way that, you're not going to have to deal with the stuff that most of us typically deal with, like toxic relationships or, messy, unorganised, chaotic work environments. You're forced as a neurotic, as someone who's highly sensitive to stress, to organise things. Not everyone does that. Maybe the act of organising is too stressful in of itself, but just coming from me personally, I do find it a lot easier with that in place to sort of minimise the stress. Like, this is the thing, I know I'm going to be stressed regardless, but can I, instead of dealing with 100% chaos and stress, can I reduce it to 50% by putting measures in place to fix it? And yeah, I can. But anyway, so yeah, most people will believe that I'm just basically talking bullshit. They wouldn't imagine that it's possible for you to be a certain way, because then it basically begs the question, do we have free will? Do we have any control over our lives, or is it just fate? I'm of the opinion that we don't have free will, that we kind of do live in a predeterministic universe, and there isn't much we can really do about that. I wish that that wasn't the case, but when you look into these things and you look into them long enough, you're just forced to come to some conclusions unless you're capable of bullshitting yourself. I'm just not capable of doing that, unfortunately. So, yeah, this is the way it is. And funnily enough, as someone who is highly sensitive to stress, I actually went to a social anxiety group meetup. And this was years ago. This was maybe, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Someone who was perhaps even more neurotic than me, I would argue, set up a group to sort of find like-minded people. And he and I were very like-minded in a lot of ways. Equally, it's a few not disagreements, but a few differences between the two of us. And anyway, we ended up, he'd run the group. Every week we'd meet up with people that are struggling with stress and anxiety and stuff like that. And there was one guy I met there who was probably in his mid to late 50s. And I only met him the one time, and this was for an hour and a half, something like that. And like I say, this was like, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago. But I'll never forget his face, and I'll never forget what he said to me, because it's something I'm constantly reminded of, which is that he just sort of like looked at me with a sort of like this blank expression on his face and said, well, look, this is just the way it is. You know, we're just this way inclined. You know, it's just we were dealt a bad hand in life. And I don't know, it was just this whole blasé message over the idea that we are stuck living in a living hell. And I didn't want to believe it at the time. I thought, well, no, there must be some way to get out of it. And by the time I'm 55, I don't ever want to be you. I don't ever want to be, you know, some old guy who's given up on the idea of sort of just turning things around and minimising this sort of feeling of sort of constant worry and fear and anxiety. I wanted to be someone who could figure this stuff out. But in that time, in that, like I say, 13, 14 years, however long it's been, I've come to the conclusion that I agree with this guy. You know, like, perhaps you have to live, you know, 4 or 5 decades on this earth and just realise that despite your best efforts, there's nothing really you can do about how you are, about your personality. It really does seem to be fixed. And honestly, if anyone could ever recommend me any methodology, techniques or practice that one could do to change their personality, specifically minimise one's neuroticism, I would love to hear it, and I would even be willing to try it to the best that I can, because I feel like that's it. We're stuck where we are, and I guess overall that's a pretty scary and distressing thought. So yeah, what do you do about that? I mean, I suppose at least to some degree it takes the pressure out of feeling like you've got to resist this circumstance. You think, you know, it's like, yeah, you feel like that's the end of the battle. You don't have to resist this whole feeling as though you can change and that you're inadequate if you can't make the changes. So to some degree, after that point, you know, after you've tried to change, and I think trying to change is something certainly in your teens, 20s, 30s that you should try to the best of your ability to do. But at a certain point, you have to come to the realisation that that's it. You know, you are who you are, and there's very little you can do to change potentially. And if that is the case, you know, what measures can you put in place to sort your life out and things like that? So yeah, it's scary. It's scary being scared of nothing, because if you're highly neurotic, you're going to be someone who's anxious or worried about pretty much everything all of the time. Just think of things that could potentially worry you. You know, going to work, the traffic, the drive to work, you know, visiting a doctor, visiting relatives, visiting friends visiting you, not having any friends, not having any relatives, your relatives potentially dying in the future. Maybe they have died already and you're dealing with the ruminative thoughts about all that kind of stuff. Like, basically every negative aspect of life is kind of concentrated, 10x'd, you know, like 10 times as intense as perhaps it would be for other people. And the whole point of this video is basically to say that, you know, if you're like that as well, you're in good company. I know what it's like. It's difficult to be someone who is constantly dealing with just the stress of life, and that it never gets easier. And I'm sure there are people who aren't perhaps as neurotic. I mean, on the last test that I did, personality test, you know, I came out at 98% neurotic. I mean, not many people are going to be as anxious and worried about life as I am. But it's not a competition. Even if you're 80% that way inclined or 50% that way inclined, you know, and I've got friends like that do have fears and anxieties of their own, and we can relate over that kind of stuff and discuss it together. You know, it really isn't a competition. I'm not trying to win here, but I'm trying to just make the point that it sucks, doesn't it? It sucks. If you are highly anxious, you've probably realised in your life that most people aren't as anxious as you. At least that is the audience of the videos that I'm basically putting out. This isn't for people that are breezing through life. I mean, they're not going to really be interested in anything to do with issues of, I guess, mental health and personality and, you know, trying to figure your life out, sort your life out, improve your life, that kind of stuff. Something's going to be going wrong with you in some way, which isn't something to be ashamed of, because something will go wrong for everyone at some point in their lives. You know, for some people, they might have it quite easy and they only have 100 negative things that affect them, you know, significant negative things throughout their life. For other people, it's going to be a million things. But, you know, we're all on the same page so far as knowing what a negative thing is. But yeah, imagine that. Imagine just waking up, and then as soon as you sort of start to become conscious, having that feeling of anxiety and dread, and then going to sleep and struggling to go to sleep because you're, you know, perhaps ruminating on the day or ruminating on the future. Yeah, it sucks. I'm not really saying this for sympathy, like, because this is what it's like for me. I struggle to get up in the mornings because getting up is entering a world of hell in some ways. It's not all bad, and it goes. I have ups and downs, but, you know, let's just say for argument's sake. And then going to bed as well. It's like the whole thing about, you know, I've known people who just, when they go to bed, you know, as soon as they get into bed, they love it. There's a smile on their face. They're happy to finally be going to sleep. Within about 2 minutes after their head hits the pillow, zonk, they're out. For the neurotic, and I mean, I can't speak for everyone, I'm having to speak completely for myself here. You're going to be laying there I'm laying there for maybe 1 to 2 hours, just desperately trying to find a way to calm the thoughts down, to stop thinking, and particularly negative thinking. It's exhausting, and it's just, I suppose really the point of this is just to raise awareness for the fact that that type of existence is a thing. And it's not, I know it's not just me, you know, it's me now, and it was this guy at this social anxiety group 15 years ago. There are just some of us that are just going to have a harder time of life, and I guess I'm acknowledging that here in myself, and I'm acknowledging that in you if you've watched to the end of this video, that you know, I appreciate that you're potentially dealing with something yourself, and yeah, it's not easy, is it? So anyway, I'll leave it there. I'll catch you again in a future video. See you next time.